Hi, everybody. I am Jennifer Cunningham. I'm the AVP of Alumni Relations, and I'll be hosting our webinar today with Marc Barone. He's a graduate alumni, class of 90, has his master's in civil engineering from Lehigh, and is calling us today from a small town about 40 miles from London, where he lives in a 700-year-old farmhouse. So just a little bit about the choreography. We will hear from Marc. He'll talk for about 5 or 10 minutes about his company, AECOM. He is the CEO of Continental Europe there, their pandemic response and how he coordinated a global response to COVID and all the tools he used and management techniques. He'll tell us about that for 5 to 10 minutes, and then we'll open it up for your questions and comments. Type those in the chat. We have 43 people now on the line. So the easiest way to do that is through the chat. You'll see that at the bottom of your screen, just click on the cartoon bubble and the chat box will come up. I will read and manage the questions for Marc so that he can concentrate on your answers. If there's anything we don't get to, we will send those to Marc and he can respond through us or directly to you, however we choose to do that. So let's get started. As I mentioned, Marc is the CEO of AECOM Continental Europe. They are an infrastructure consulting firm that works, a Fortune 500 company that works all over the world. So I'm excited to hear your success story, Marc. Take it away.
Hey, thanks, Jennifer, and welcome everyone to the call. I'll just quickly give you some context of Continental Europe. We participate in 10 core countries, but we have operations in over 20 countries and over 2,200 employees across that space. And you can see that we've got offices scattered in those areas. So when the pandemic hit, there was quite a wide response that had to be dealt with. But one of the things I did want to start with is how you sort of think about strategy in terms of preparing yourself for these things. And what we had done before the pandemic hit is we'd gone through simplifying our business, looking for ways of making sure that we were in the most profitable position that we could be in, and knowing that there was no optimal strategy to deal with it. You just have to kind of deal with the things as they come along. And usually what you see is you might have a strategic path that kind of looks like it's going in one direction, but the reality is you kind of go up and down and you hit peaks and troughs, and sometimes you have certain things. And we tried to learn as much as we could from the challenge. We also found that if you think about your employees' well-being and being well-being led, you could move very quickly through this. And a collective response in terms of getting everybody behind it was really important. Our strategy was very simple. It focused on 4 pillars, and it was around how the shape of the business, how we managed the performance, how we collaborated, and how we engaged. Now, we put that in place before COVID, and what we were able to do is take these pillars to actually deal with our COVID response in a very simple, straightforward way around engaging the workforce, thinking about how we grew the business, and also looking at that performance capability. But we did have a very simple approach to what we were doing here. Now, how did we respond to the pandemic? So you had to kind of go to the point where you were delivering from anywhere. So we had projects scattered across Europe, or you could say scattered across the world. And these projects were anything from doing an airport design where we had 70 people at Schiphol Airport working with the client directly. And suddenly all those people are being sent back to their homes and having to produce. So how we could maintain that continuity was really important, and IT was there. Then along with that, you then start to think about, well, how do we get ready for the digital implications of the challenge that we faced, but along with that, the health and safety issues of having all these people suddenly working from home, with the isolation aspects of it, or just simple occupational health issues around not having the right desks and those sorts of things. Our response then actually created what we called some positive brand and cultural impacts, because people are really embracing this wanting to work flexibly, and now we saw that more than 60% of our people want to actually work 2 to 3 days from home. And that actually changes the way you think about how you monitor and you improve what's going on. It really will have an impact on the way we'll think about real estate going forward. So we then constantly talked about what we learned, and what we were learning was the coronavirus thing actually provided less impact. You started to see traffic patterns coming down. People are consuming less. We needed to really think about well-being is one of the things that I talked about. The way that we responded to some of the health changes, wearing PPE in public spaces and dealing with, if you were sick, you didn't go to the office. And then finally, our business systems had to change in a very sort of fast way and be very flexible to the new way of working. So what we found, and this is a term that we were starting to talk about in the office, is we were thinking about what you keep and what you leave behind to define this sort of golden middle, because where the physical and virtual are sort of coming together, and that actually is sort of cementing how the strategy kind of moves forward and how the business, will links up. And we were saying that, with people, space, flexibility, technology, all that linking to a different kind of culture. And now what we're doing is building around three key areas. And we've had some global competitions around this, how we use technology and connectivity, how we think about our workplace and design our work, and then also what does that mean to our culture and behaviors to actually think about what we're doing differently to create an environment where people can thrive and do sort of different things. So our response was kind of pretty robust, and like I said to one of our managers that was running our Spanish operations, we had 400 people based in our Madrid office, and I said to him, if I said to you on the 5th of January that and I happened to be in the office on the 5th of January that I wanted everybody to work from home in 2 days, you would have told me I was crazy. But on the 13th of March, we actually did it. Uh, and we were able to move from the 11th of March, where Madrid shut down, to having all those people working from home. And in some instances, we were able to work in a more productive fashion. So Jennifer, that's a really quick canter through the things, and I think I've kind of done it in about 5 minutes. So I'll stop sharing now, and then we can start taking questions.
Okay, great. Yes, as I mentioned, the chat is at the bottom of your screen. Just click that, and you can type in a question or comment for Marc. While people are doing that, I was thinking, everyone who manages people these days goes through that process. But the whole part with being global, you've got all the different, and the business you do, you have all the different laws and the policies that are changing. I mean, even just in my locality here, it changes every day, it seems. Did you change people's jobs? Is there anyone in your office whose job it is to just make a giant spreadsheet of all the different things that you have to comply with?
We were doing that on a country by country basis, because each country had a different response, and also each country had different regulations on how to deal with COVID.
Right.
And that was also the subsidies that you were getting from governments when people were effectively furloughed, and it varied. And some countries that you think of as being next door to each other, like the Netherlands and Belgium, they had completely different approaches, and they actually shut down at different times. So we had Belgium shutting down much earlier than the Netherlands, but we had people actually think about it as a completely porous border. And if you understand Europe, the driving borders around Europe were supposedly completely porous, and at times they were actually being shut down. So the concepts of movement, which we take advantage of as from a freedom of movement perspective, was something that was being challenged, and that actually put a strain on delivering projects, because it didn't matter if we brought somebody from Spain or Romania or Poland to work on something. It now suddenly changed, and we had to get these people working virtually in a way that worked. And what we were finding is the mantra that came out of it is, you collaborate in the office, but you can produce at home. And we were finding that production work was actually as efficient as it could be at home, and in some cases more efficient. So we, even through the pandemic, we maintained our profitability, we maintained our revenue, because we were actually taking advantage of all the various things that were available and trying to keep people focused on what was there. But the virtual town halls, the virtual coffees, and all those were a way of driving engagement in a very positive fashion.
Yeah, yeah. Barbara has a question. Have you intentionally changed or adapted your leadership style during this time, played up your strengths, learned new things around communication, collaboration, the balance of relational time versus problem solving?
Yeah, I think I've had to be a lot more organized, because when you go and visit an office and you pop yourself in. So my normal work week pre-COVID was I would get on an airplane on a Monday morning. I would generally fly to one of our offices, and I would spend time in that office, and sometimes maybe to a second office and see some clients along the way. And you had these sort of ad hoc interactions with people in the office. Sometimes, town halls or lunch with graduates, those sorts of things, and they couldn't be done. So you had to figure out how to create that a different level of engagement, because if you saw, one of the pillars of our strategy was around engagement,
Right.
to keep people motivated. So we ran different competitions. So we ran a design competition over Easter because we knew everyone was going to be locked down at Easter. So here's a challenge for you, and we got some great ideas out of it. So yeah, we have changed. I've tried to morph that, but the whole thing around making sure that we're in touch with lots of people and staying in touch, not physically, but virtually, has been really important.
Katrina is intrigued with these competitions. Can you talk a little bit more about those?
Yeah, the competition we ran was called Fast Forward to the Future, and we said to people, give us your design ideas on the way that you see our business shaping as a result of COVID. And we left it open to sort of any format. We had 60 different entries in that competition. Everything from the everything from a kind of nerve center idea where you have a small number of people sitting in a kind of nerve center controlling a morphing of people, to ideas where could we turn the office to be more like a convention center. So instead of being fixed high intensity office, that from week to week you actually changed what the structure of the office was. So if a team of 50 needed to do a design project, to kick off a design project, you set it up that way. If the next week you needed the space for a training class, you set it up differently. Now we're trying to adopt these ideas, because the technology component of we did adopt. So one of the things that we changed is we stopped buying desktop computers for our employees. We made sure that everybody has a laptop, everybody has a spare keyboard, everybody has an external mouth, everybody has one of these headsets that I'm wearing, so that you can work from everywhere. And then we started to look at those other things. So yeah, the competition was great. It's led to a lot of ideas. And then in the middle of all that, we were moving office in Moscow. And so we used the competition winners to design our new office in Moscow based on the things that we learned from a COVID perspective. And that was fantastic to give that team a real project. So we were planning on having an office of 196 workstations, but based on the restrictions that we had in Moscow, we had to trim that down to about 50 to start with, but we still had the same office space. So then, and in 3 phases, we can build that office back up to the 150. We decided it would never go back to the 196 that we started with. And then the design techniques that were used, we're actually selling and promoting with clients right now as we talk about workplace strategy. So it's gone from an interesting idea to a commercial prospect.
Yeah, and interesting that you took the winners of the competition and gave them the opportunity to do this really cool new project. Like, that's a really neat reward.
Yeah, because we thought, what was the point in laying out an office, a new office for people that would be coming back and putting a bunch of big red X's on desks that they wouldn't be able to use. You wanted to make the office feel like you were coming back to something new and different if we were talking about doing things in a different way.
Right. Guy's question is, we're a large construction and truck-based service across the Midwest and US. Our proactive approach and processes are at odds with many of our competitors and communities and create stress. Did that happen with AECOM? Did COVID fatigue set in through this change?
COVID fatigue has set in, and I think it's set in multiple ways, because In the summertime, we were repopulating our offices. We were bringing people back to the office. We were using the workplace readiness approach that we took, and in that we had plans and how you bring the office back. But I think the positive that we had from it was our response was more proactive than some of our competitors, and our clients recognized that. So I think you can change it into a differentiator. And we were able to have people that were in contact with us, because we continued to recruit certain people throughout the whole COVID crisis, because we had pockets of growth. And when people heard what you were doing for employees, it was actually a positive thing. So I think if you're able to do things differently, you can do that. But the kind of COVID fatigue, I'll agree with. It is sort of tough. I find it odd that I haven't been on a plane for a very long time. And how you keep that engagement going. And it's really difficult, especially when you have difficult client situations to deal with, or you need to negotiate, a settlement with a client, because all these things do happen. Trying to do that virtually is nearly impossible. And some of these discussions have dragged out. So you do think that you want to get back to some kind of normality at some stage.
Yeah, exactly. Which sets up Chris Marshall's question, who thanks you for making time for Lehigh alums. So post-COVID, what do you envision the future of work will look like? Are we all working from home? Will commercial real estate and the need for people to gather in the same place become extinct? Or do you envision a hybrid work life?
I have this kind of idea that I'm sort of like working on. So probably it'll be a precursor to a thought piece I'll be posting on LinkedIn. If you guys like the idea, let me know. I think we're going to look at work in three different phases. There's work that you can do in an asynchronous mode, which basically means you can do anytime without the input of other people. Then there's work that is required that you can do on a synchronous mode, like what we're doing right now. You and I are interacting with, I think, 40 other people on here, and it's live, and it has to be live, okay? Because we couldn't have the dynamics of the question. And then finally, there'll be the component of work that has to be face-to-face. And so I think those three things will help us look at that. But what's going to be critical is how we look at cities in particular, because I think commercial real estate is going to have an issue, and how we repurpose commercial real estate to maybe take advantage of, in Europe, I think there'll be a view that you can do some more social good with that. And will there be certain things that take place? And I think they're even talking about some work from home taxes that are potentially being proposed, where you're taxed if you work from home, and that helps support the other businesses. I'm not sure if that'll fly, but some economists have sort of put that forward as a way of helping different European economies thrive. But I think that asynchronous, synchronous, and face-to-face approach is something that is the way I see work shaping, and how we make that work is in a most productive way as possible.
Yeah, and if we're going to be working more from home, Jim's question about how you deal with the many pressures that people have at home while trying to work, even just the simple pressure of worrying about your family and their health. So how did you deal with all of that?
I think we tried to adopt the sort of maximum flexibility here, and I think that's where the kind of concept of synchronous and asynchronous work comes in. So with schools being shut and people having to homeschool their children, those sorts of things. Some people's clock ended up being more like a dumbbell, where they did a few hours in the morning, they had a period of quiet time, and then they did time in the afternoon. If you could do your job that way, that was fine. We were also finding that some designers actually like working later at night, and with the music kind of turned up. So this is what I mean about the collaborate in the office and produce at home. That if you can create that space, because sometimes an open plan office isn't the greatest place to actually put your head down and produce, because you stick on noise canceling headphones and you try to create your own space. But the question around the well-being is really important, and we started to make sure that the mantra was cameras on for meetings. And if you ever noticed that people weren't turning their cameras on, it was an invitation for us to kind of say, is there something going on? Do we need to check in on this person? And I think some of our country managers did things like send care packages to employees. I sent a care package to every one of our Continental Europe employees, which was 5 cloth face masks, a clean bag and a dirty bag, so that you always had that, and that was a sort of gift that we put out there. When you looked at the cost of doing that for everyone, it wasn't that great, and the return was phenomenal from an engagement point of view. We have people sending chocolates to people in the offices, or stress balls. So there is some cost associated with that, but I think it gets paid back because, we are saving money in other areas as a result of it.
Sure, sure. Um, James is asking, were you asked to develop new services to respond to the pandemic? For example, decon? I don't know what that is. Maybe you do.
Yeah,
Testing.
yeah, we weren't really asked to do those things. We in some ways took it upon ourselves. So in some instances, I think you might be talking about using UV light or
Oh,
different air filtration
decontamination.
systems. Yeah, in buildings, those sorts of things. I think there was a lot that was done from a thought leadership perspective when you take a look at we do a lot of work in airports, and our clients in airports were trying to ask us about how you handle people movements. So there were a lot of simulations being done there. We're also doing simulations for some of our developer and commercial real estate people on if we have these restrictions in terms of the number of people allowed in an elevator, the number of people where are the bottlenecks going to be, so we could actually start to simulate people movements. And those things came out. We used those tools when we were doing our planning for projects anyway. So it was repurposing tools that we used anyway. We weren't really creating new stuff. We were trying to take the existing stuff we had and figure out how we repurposed it to the challenge that was facing us.
Right. Glenn is asking about your IT group. Were there any special challenges for them to get everyone up and running from home?
Yeah, the biggest challenges for them in some instances was the fact that of the 2,200 employees that we talked about 500 of them were on desktop machines. And being on desktop machines, we had to either get them a laptop, and buying laptops in the middle of the pandemic was really tough, or we physically had to move their work machine to their home. And in some instances, we were putting computers in taxis to get them to people's houses. So the IT team was responding in terms of opening up the way we use our VPN, and also giving people solutions on how to share files without having to deal with some of the issues that was a bottleneck on our VPN. And we came up with a couple of interesting techniques. So I can't go into the detail of, but using Teams in a different way to share files, which became had some security aspects of it. But then there's some work that we did for government entities that had to be done in a certain way, and we had to set up different secure portals for them. So the IT guys just absolutely worked their socks off to keep people going, and they still do that now, because it's a lot different if you have an issue with your computer now. We have a help desk that that's managed in a call center in a low cost area, but some of the specific things you can't manage that way. And we did see a lot of strain on them, and they performed admirably. It was unbelievable. And I think that's that sort of idea that I put in, that collective response, and then having that collective response, and without the response from IT, we wouldn't have been able to perform the way we did perform.
Yeah, can you imagine this happening like in 1995? What
No, dial up and yeah.
My
Exactly.
husband works on AutoCAD down in the basement, and even that is a strain, for today. It's like he's on dial-up trying to get those files across. Guy's question says, our operating units are highly autonomous. Messaging from operating unit leaders can dilute the broader shareholder and CEO's message. So did you wind up personally addressing everybody through broadcast messages? Like, how did that communication, how does it work?
We had a pretty simple cascade. So we did what was it, bi-weekly. So I had a monthly call with the top 200 in the business anyway. That was part of the normal cascade. So what we started was initially almost a daily email from me to people. And then that kind of slowed down to weekly. And what we were finding was that that email was actually read by 80% of the people that we sent it to. So, and usually before that, we were maybe getting a 40% hit rate. So that simple communication tool, which everybody could open up. We then did, I then would do a kind of bi-weekly call with everyone via Teams Live. So it was a sort of download 30-minute presentation. And then we had a weekly call with all our country managers on a Friday to make sure that the messages they were putting out for Monday were consistent, so that we were trying to do that. But we then had to leave certain specifics to the country managers, because the dynamic of what was taking place in Germany was very different than Poland, was very different than the Netherlands and Sweden. And so we did have to make sure that we had some autonomy there, but we tried to work under an umbrella that we all bought into.
Right. And that's one of those things, like, as we recover from all this, do you think you'll continue that kind of communication now that everyone's on Zoom, everyone's used to it? Have you found?
I think we were doing a lot of that. It was the sort of frequency of it, because I would do 3 or 4 town halls, face-to-face town halls in offices a week to do that. And so now those town halls, I can actually be more efficient, because you can do 3 town halls in a day. You can do one in Madrid, you can do one in Warsaw, and you can do one in The Hague, because you can do them virtually, which you couldn't physically do before. The difficulty is making sure you get that interaction. Teams Live or Zoom down broadcast events like this one, like you're telling me there's 40 people on the line. I don't know that. I can't. You don't see the faces. So that interaction is really important to get the right level of engagement. And that's where it's really important to make sure that you have small enough groups where people can actually monitor almost the well-being of their teams. And that's why getting that small group together is really important.
Right. We have a couple minutes left. I'm interested in, we work in higher education, which traditionally moves at the speed of education, not the speed of business. But I know in large companies too, there's a lot of bureaucracy. And when you're trying to make a decision, there's a lot of, sometimes those things can take a really long time. I've noticed in our industry, because we have to, we can make decisions a lot faster. And it's a lot funner for me, actually, to move faster. Have you found that too? Like, are your clients making decisions much more quickly, and how's that affected your business?
I think we went from taking weeks to sometimes make a decision to them moving at sort of light speed, because you had to, right? We weren't talking about the dangers at early on with COVID. People weren't quite sure how the transmission was taking place and those sorts of things. So you had to kind of react and use your gut instinct as much as you could, and knowing that you were trying to do the best thing you could for your people. Our clients, I think, have been a bit more cautious in their response, and they've asked us to help guide them through certain things, because we still have some clients that are demanding people to be on site to do work for them. They don't believe it can be done remotely, and I think that's where you have to kind of break things down and say, look, judge us on our output, not on our input.
Right.
And with when you do that, so we're starting to see that in certain areas, our contracting, where we're a time and materials business in certain instances, has been asked to be moved to output based. So that actually creates opportunities for you to generate more margin out of it if you're able to do it more effectively than just generally the margin you generate on an hour. So I think there's been a kind of real mix, but agility has been the key, because from one day to the next, you didn't know what was going to happen, especially in the first phase of COVID. Was what was going on in Poland? Were we shutting down the office? Sweden is a great example. It never shut down.
Right.
And the clients were sort of like, well, why don't you still come and see us? Because we're open for business. And then the aspects that we had that took place in Russia were very odd, because I traveled to Russia in April, which was probably one of the last trips I did, and it's a strange place to begin with, but what you had to deal with was a kind of a weird propaganda that things weren't that bad, but
Mhm.
then you could see it on the street and you could see it in our offices because of the COVID cases that you could easily track.
Right.
So it is that managing exactly what's going on by having that local knowledge. So yeah, it was quite a challenge, but I think in the end, a lot of people learned a lot of things that we can apply to our business,
Yeah.
not over analyzing things, taking decisions at what I'd say sort of light speed, and moving quickly, has been something that I hope we continue to use going forward in our business models.
Yeah, definitely. And unfortunately, our time together is at an end, but I will echo Chris's and make it 2 votes. He says 1 vote here from here for a blog post on asynchronous, synchronous, and face-to-face future work styles. I like this concept a lot, and it applies to several industries. So that's your assignment, Mark, and
Yeah, yeah.
I'll grade it when you're done.
So we'll look forward on on a LinkedIn post soon. And like I said, if anybody wants to connect via LinkedIn, you can easily find me. It's the Marc_Barone, and various other places. So I know that when this invite went out, a few people did connect, and I really
Good.
appreciate that. It's nice to be in touch with the alumni community.
Yes, great. And thank you so much for your time. I'm seeing a few people here thanking you as well. So time well spent. I learned a lot, and good luck with everything in the next several months there in the UK.
Thanks, appreciate it. I appreciate everybody joining. So, and if I said any other questions come out of this, happy to take them offline and deal with that.
Great.
Jennifer, appreciate your time today as well.
Yep. Thanks, everyone.